That's a great business model. We give you something to create the software, then our next model tells you all the bugs in it.
How broken it is.
And then our next one will fix it.
Hello, and welcome back to Artificial Developer Intelligence, a weekly conversation show about AI in software development. We go through hundreds of links and dozens of newsletters on AI every week, so you don't have to. I am Shimin Zhang, and with me today are my co-hosts, Dan. Much of the bullshit future is already here, Lasky. And Rahul, he wants AI to be a civilizational destiny story, which makes him energetic but weakly calibrated, Yadav. How are we doing today, gents?
I don't think
You got Dan with that one.
Yeah, he doesn't always get me with them, but he really got me. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
It's finally getting nice in the Pacific Northwest investment.
True.
We're almost,
I know. Yeah, and it's like 80 degrees in my room right now because I have the window, the skylight, which you can see via video, and it's steamy. But yes, loving this weather. On today's show, as per usual, we're going to start with the news thread mail, where we're going to talk about Alibaba's new Qwen 3.6 35B model, as well as the newly released Claude Opus 4.7, and lastly, some AI security news following our Mythos segment last week about cal.com going closed source.
Then we have a quick hop into the technique corner, where we're going to be talking about rules and gates. We'll find out what that means then.
Yep. Followed by post-processing, where we're going to talk about some AI vibe coding horror story and the future of everything is lies.
Then next up, we find out what Shimin has been doing with his, apparently we just found out, $200 a month Claude subscription on Vibe Intel.
Didn't even use Claude Code for the whole thing. But lastly, we're going to do 2 minutes to midnight, where everyone will talk about where we are in the AI bubble cycle. Is there a bubble? Maybe there isn't a bubble. Anywho, we'll find out.
Let's get at it.
All right. First up, on the 14th, which is last week, Alibaba released Qwen 3.6B, A3B. I'm not really sure what the A3B stands for. It's a 35 billion parameter mixture of experts model. It is the open source version of the Qwen 3, or is it Max, which was released 2 weeks ago. And that one was closed sourced. So this is the smaller kind of everyday usage model that the Quinn team has released. Usually, we look at these models and we look at the benchmarks, say this looks pretty good, and we move on. One thing to know about this model, it is multimodal.
You might move on. I go run it on my framework desktop.
Well, what I was going to say is...
You finally ran one. Finally.
From the benchmark... From the benchmarks, it looks to be on the Gemma 4 level, and it's also a Gemma 4 size model, especially given that it's a mixture of experts, so at any given time, only 3 billion parameters are actually active. So what I actually got a chance to do is, last week I was talking about how the Pi agent's Anthropic OAuth connection no longer works, and that really sucks because I had to migrate over to use Claude Code for everything. And this week I bit the bullet and set up the local Qwen 3.6 model as my main driver for my Pi agent.
How did you get tool calling to work with Pi? Because I played around with that and couldn't get tool calling to work. What did you host it on?
It is llama.cpp with the Unsloth version of the model itself.
Yeah, like the GGO.
Yeah.
Cons.
I didn't find issues with tool calling.
Interesting.
What was especially useful for me is, look, gut check. I feel like this is a Sonnet level model. It was able to read all the skills, understand all the skills, make skill configurations to update itself to work with Quinn. And I believe I was talking about last week how, if you still miss your Opus 4.7 level kind of large model, you can just get your Pi agent to call Claude Code and send back the result. So I asked Qwen 3.6, hey, install Claude Code, kind of do some Docker configuration to get the my native Claude Code credentials mounted. But after that's all set up, I asked Qwen 3.6 to, get me the weather in Lewistown, Montana, using Claude Code, and it just worked. It was very successful.
Quinn could have handled the weather by itself.
It's a Chinese model. Sometimes they may need help for US data. I don't know.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm fairly impressed with the model. I think this will be my new daily orchestrator model, bearing kind of any other latest model development.
And I know we're way off script here, but there is no script. I actually just got over the weekend, got Gemma 4 running locally because I was curious about it. Like the beta size, I think it's only 36B, right?
Yep.
And I was actually really surprised at how slow it is, which makes me think I'm doing something wrong. Like I was barely pushing 50 tokens on inference out of it, which doesn't seem right. So there must be something wrong about the config that I used.
50 tokens is not terrible. I was getting...
But it's a tiny model. Like I've run like 108 billion parameter ones on that same setup and gotten like, 10 to 20 tokens.
Interesting.
Something like that.
Yeah. It would be great to do a deep dive sometime about token output speed. Quinn was giving me 90, 95 tokens per second, which I think is pretty decent.
Well, you've got a way faster actual GPU than I do. I just have a boatload of RAM sitting on an integrated GPU.
Yeah, that too. The entire model did not fit in my GPU either. I was offloading a lot of it into regular RAM.
Now that we've lost Rahul, let's keep going. It's like you guys are nerds. Why am I on this podcast anyway?
No, so part of what Dan was saying, like now I'm used to this news every week, so fine. But then one part of me was like, at what point do these open source make sense? Because you have to versions help you identify different things. But at what point does Opus 4.7 or GPT 5. Whatever just becomes Opus and GPT, and you don't have versions? It just is another thing that you expect to get better over time. And if it degrades, if you're having compute struggles, then it's also the same thing. And you're like, it's the thing. It's got no other,
Imagine
there's no major minor versions attached to it. We expect the thing to do the thing.
Imagine the internet ballyhooing if people didn't have a version number to tie it to.
Yeah,
I'm
especially
done with XYZ model. They've done. I don't know what they did to it, but it's...
but Dan, this is where you were saying last week about seizing the means of token production or token generation. Like, I like having a weaker model that I know is on my computer and will never get degraded.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
That said, I did all that work just to hear rumors today that Anthropic is potentially allowing its Claude Code usage on third-party harnesses again.
Oh, really?
I potentially did all this work for no reason, but that's for next week's news.
Well, there are also maybe some other news coming out of them, which that's right. You're going to hear a Dan's rant about that, too.
Shall we move on to potentially the biggest model news?
Yeah.
Of this past few weeks?
Speaking of Anthropic, they have dropped what they're calling a sort of limited slice of mythos, essentially. So they've supposedly dumbed it down enough that it's safe enough to release to the masses. So we now have Claude Opus 4.7. Again, I think rather than just going through the benchmarks and everything, you can read those yourselves and whatever. Be more interesting to talk a little bit about how things are being perceived with this. And what I've seen so far is a lot of people are complaining quite a bit about how fast it burns through your token usage, which is kind of interesting. Mostly because it's I didn't realize that happens every time, but this is the first time where I've seen people actually be a little, even though I've also seen descriptions of it being almost like step change again, sort of like 4.6 or 4.5 really was in the first place. Seeing people going I'm not sure it's worth it. 4.6 was actually starting to be good enough, which to me, that's the funny thing that's worth kind of talking about, Wow, if we sort of reached an inflection point where you had good enough and you were fine with using good enough all day versus super smart for a short amount of time.
Right. Well, the token thing is because they're using a new embedding. They're using the mythos embedding for their token, so it's naturally going to bloat.
Yep. Yeah, I saw there was a whole article that did a deep dive on just the new tokenizer, and it's something like a 3x difference.
Wow.
Just plain English. More tokens. But the same article theorized a little bit about, it'd also be maybe going for a deep dive at some point, that's perhaps why, like one of the other things they advertise it is that it's much more precise in terms of instruction following than previous models. And they were theorizing that perhaps that was due to the new tokenizer and was sort of like a requirement in order to get that precision out of it, which is kind of interesting. What else is new? Better vision capabilities we're talking about. So all of a sudden, I mean, we got the new release of the Anthropic like design tool. So that's fascinating because like sort of historically, they've always lagged behind Gemini a little bit. And yeah, so 4.7 can, I haven't played around with that myself yet, but supposedly is better at understanding pictures and can quote unquote see in a higher resolution because of the new tokenizer.
Yeah, I hear the same rumors that this is like a distillation of the Mythos model in some way. And which makes sense because if you look at the actual system card, there are a ton of references to the Mythos preview when it comes to like alignment risks and just kind of shortcomings of the model, which makes no sense because this is a, Opus 4.7 document. Why are you talking about alignment issues with Mythos if this isn't a baby version of Mythos in some way? Have you got a chance to use it? It's been out for about a week now.
I just realized today that it was turned on my expensive account. So I've used it for about 3 minutes, which is not enough for me to personally draw any conclusions from.
My experience with 4.7 has been, at first, I was like, oh, it's completing everything so quickly. This must be amazing. And then I realized it was doing everything super quick because it wasn't actually, doing the usual tool call cycles. Yeah, it was making a lot more assumptions. And then the first time I called it hallucinating, it was like a really silly hallucination. It was like it counted something. It made up another time I had corresponded with someone else. It said it happened 3 times as opposed to 2. And I was like, this is like a really amateur level of hallucination that Opus 4.6 would not have made. So yeah, it started off on the wrong foot with me. And so when I also read the same like folks talking about Opus 4.7 being the best model ever in their own personal benchmarks, I wonder if that is related to the instruction following. In fact, I wrote about this, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't used it enough to personally make opinions yet, but let's talk next week and I'll probably have formed some.
Should we talk about the Simon Willison's pelican-on-a-bicycle benchmark?
That was pretty funny. Yeah, so he stacked up your new Quinn model, right, against Opus 4.7, and in his expert opinion, Quinn made a better looking pelican on a bicycle than Opus.
No. Well, not his. I think everybody will agree that the bicycle frame is off in the 4.7 version.
It's true. And also he's looking backwards, which is a very dangerous way to ride a bike pretty fast.
Maybe not if you were a bird.
I mean, maybe he's just looking at the sun, but...
Yeah. And this is really shocking, right? Because he mentioned that this is the first time this correlation between stronger models and better Pelican SVG drawing was broken.
I like how he's also done flamingo on a unicycle. Pretty great.
Yeah. So I ended up doing some follow-up experiments based on that benchmark because it was so shocking. I used the same prompt. I didn't use my local Qwen 3.6, but I used the Qwen 3.6 from OpenRouter, the more powerful, I think so, I don't know, a couple of 100 billion, maybe 1 trillion parameters version. And got the same initial results. But then one thing that's really curious about the 4.7 is even with thinking set to max, it only used 20 reasoning tokens for this SVG task. So ran another experiment. This time it was just a try hard prompt, right? Generate the same.
What the harness you used? Was it Claude code?
No, it was a vibe coded harness that calls API calls with no system prompt at all. Okay. So this is all raw performance. I asked the models to try a little harder and think harder. And 4.7 still did fairly terribly. But again, both the completion token count and the reasoning token count was really low. So I figured maybe, like you were saying earlier, maybe it's just really good at following directions. And if you give it a crappy direction, it's going to give you a crappy output. So I asked 4.7 to expand the prompt for me. And it created a whole paragraph or multiple paragraphs. And I pumped it into the models again. And this time, 4.7 still has a very small reasoning budget, which I thought was really interesting.
It did a lot better.
Right. It did do a lot better despite using significantly fewer reasoning tokens and completion tokens than either the Qwen 3.6 or 4.6. So, if this is generalizable, I think maybe 4.7 doesn't actually burn as many tokens as you think it would, right? And lastly, I did it one last time with including in the prompt to generate a 1200 by 1200 SVG, because I was noticing that Opus 4.7 was consistently generating smaller SVGs than the other two. So I figured this is a good way to baseline all three models. This time it did produce more, but it still only used maybe, an eighth of the total reasoning tokens as either Quinn and an order of magnitude less, like 40 times less thinking tokens than Opus 4.6. And if you look at the actual cost, 4.6 version of this expanded prompt cost me like $2, whereas 4.7 only cost 35 cents. So I have a feeling that maybe the token story of 4.7 is a little overblown, at least according to this not benchmark experiment.
Interesting.
All right, that's all I got. It's just lazy.
Did you try the prompt that it generated for you against the other models too?
Yes. What do you mean against which other models?
So when you had it generate the like really in-depth prompt for you, did you you sent that to all three?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. And that was generated in 4.7 or?
So the prompt was generated by 4.7. So maybe it has a bias for 4.7. But the bikes are the output of that large prompt is actually pretty good. I will argue this is one of the better bike frames I've seen.
Yeah. And it's fine, at least. It's no worse than the other ones, that's for sure.
Right. And one thing I also want to point out is
it's got Opus feathers in 1200 by 12. None of the other ones have feathers.
Well, Opus 4.7 never bothered to add like clouds and other extraneous, scene additions.
Because you didn't ask for it.
Exactly. Yeah. It just follows instruction and only follows your instruction. It's not proactively helpful, which I think is what is rubbing a lot of people off. Rubbing them off. Yeah.
The wrong way. Yeah.
Anyways. Rahul, any thoughts?
No. Subscribe to ADI Pod After Dark for models rubbing people off.
That's right.
I was on the side looking at I've never tried this with Gemini, so I was like, what does Nano Banana do of SVG of a pelican riding a bicycle? And it's got beach it's got palm trees and it's got a pretty good image. The pelican has a fish in its bicycle basket.
It's very helpful. Yeah. It's an extremely helpful model. All right. So next up, we have this news that Cal.com is going closed sourced, and they are doing it for security reasons. This goes back to what we were discussing last week about the implication of Mythos on the cybersecurity industry. Will we see more open source apps going closed source just for the sake Cal.com is releasing a open source version of their code base still. So they're not just completely going closed source, but they say that the open source version has sufficiently diverged from their existing closed source code base that it's safe to do so. And then on the other hand, we have this article from Drew Buinig about titled "Cybersecurity Looks Like Proof of Work Now," where he talks about the finding from the AI Security Institute supporting Anthropic's claim that Mythos did indeed find a lot of security vulnerabilities, but also that it was the only model to beat the last one's task, 32-step corporate network attack simulation spanning initial reconnaissance through full network takeover. Mythos accomplished this 3 out of 10 times. No other models succeeded at all. But I do want to say it took them $12,000 per attempt. So $125,000 for all 10 runs, which seems like a lot of money.
Maybe, but then also the old saying is the attacker's only out to win once. So for your 125K, if you can, pop some systems where you can ransomware people or extract a lot of data, do all sorts of crazy stuff, then I'm sure there's plenty of state sponsors out there who would happily
Yeah,
give you
especially.
that and much more for your token spend.
Right. But it's also not something that Script Kiddie in living in a
Yeah.
basement can afford for the most part.
Unless
I mean,
Opus
unless they
4's
did,
token efficiency really gets them that.
or unless they do like a cheaper run against a easier target that nets them the 125. You're also assuming that they're using the tokens legally too. Like they've probably done a supply chain injection with like good old Claude 4.6, which has stolen your keys.
That's fair.
Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. But Drew is stating that he thinks we're going to go into a 3-phase cycle for vibe coding going forward. You have your development, you have your review cycle, and then you have a hardening cycle. And software might get expensive again. But this time, the expensive part is the tokens used for hardening, which seems kind of reasonable. So maybe open source is not dead. I hope not.
Well, I was never worried about it being dead in the context that this is, right? Like, security was never the thing that concerned me about LMs with this. Maybe it should be, but like the one that really got me was we were talking about last time where it's like, what if open source is dead, but because LMs will just stop suggesting new projects, you know?
Right. Yeah, that too.
Usage stagnates circa 2025 technology.
Yeah, but now if you look at the like the GitHub pull request count and repo count, it's bigger than ever.
Yeah, true. And maybe security is the thing that prevents that because all the 2025 software will get ripped apart by Mythos. So you just literally can't use it.
That's a great business model. We give you something to create the software, then our next model tells you all the bugs in it.
How broken it is. Yeah.
And then our next one will fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Charge you 3 times.
Yeah. The whole going closed source with cal.com is pretty interesting. And I think that's just going to happen more and more. Because you don't really have like, if anyone can easily exploit, your software, especially with like something like Mythos on their side, and you can't really keep up with AI generated PRs and all that. It's very hard to maintain those things. So it's like a way to shut these things down.
The other one I was reading about that would also lend itself towards this type of thing happening too is that there's 2 dudes put together. It's an actual company apparently, but their whole shtick is they'll take any piece of code that's open source and then it uses LLMs to write you something that's functionally equivalent but doesn't violate the open source license. And it's sort of an art piece too, in the sense that it's like they're that sort of raging against the LLM in that way. Yep. But weirdly, it is an actual company. Like it's an LLC.
Interesting. I thought it was a joke. Okay.
So, yeah, I forget the name of it. And maybe we'll find it and throw it.
No free plugs.
Yeah, that's true too.
They want to plug. They have to buy advertisement.
It's $200 a month plug code. Doesn't pay for itself, people. Just kidding. Right. I know that assertions. Wait, I didn't even say that right. Jokes that I was trying to make around that in the past didn't land well with some of our listeners. Nobody's paying for any of this.
Yeah. No, this is a pure labor of love here. Okay, let's move on to Technique Corner. I have this quick Technique Corner article from Jesse Vincent, the creator of Superpower, which, by the way, I switched over to the latest version of Superpower. Awesome skill suite. I think everyone should use it. It's titled Rules and Gates, and the technique here is basically instead of instructing Claude Code to not do something, formulate your instruction as a gate. So I think he has here as an example, instead of saying verify claims with web searches before asserting them, say when a claim about what exists or doesn't exist is forming, arrow, web search happens, arrow, you search URLs in hand, then I speak. So essentially turning a optional preference into almost like a graph, a directional graph, so that the agent must self-verify that the criteria is fulfilled before they'll move on to the next task. And the reason for this is I think we've all experienced the AI agents basically hand waving away a fairly crucial part of the spec, going like either, oh, this isn't important now, or this is for an MVP, we can be implemented at a later time, or anything. Like it's really good at rationalizing things away. Probably because humans are very good at it. So
my coworkers love it when I tell I have a coworker stories. So this just happened today. I have a coworker who was on vacation and I was covering for them on some pull requests, and Claude knew that it wasn't my pull request and kept trying to defer the work to that person. Well, yeah, this is as far as we can go. We're going to leave the rest of this for that person. And I'm like, no, we're going to continue it. No, I'm pretty sure this is all we can do. Like, it did it 3 times. I was just like, okay, or we could finish the thing that we're trying to do here.
I think it's just copying from humans.
Yeah,
again, programmers are lazy, so it's stealing from the best.
We'll wait till Dan comes back. You can handle that.
I was gonna say, I'm curious if the model or the agent would go and edit the gate to instead make it a rule just so that they can move past it, if they can do it. Because we've seen examples like that too, right? I don't like the spec you gave me. I edited the thing to what I could do, and I've done it. Or set all the tests to, say pass.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Like, it could just weasel out the evaluation of the gate. Like, oh, I don't have the URL at hand, but you know what? This isn't your project anyways. I think we can skip this gate and move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely something I could see happening.
Well, maybe happens less on 4.7 because of the explicit following. I don't know. Maybe that could be why they're doing some of this tuning.
That sounds like another fun experiment to run. Maybe I'll do that with my EX subscription this weekend and let you guys know. All right. And lastly, he talks about hooks and how hooks differs from gates and rules, because hooks are programmatic, so they are deterministic, and they're just things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a good differentiation.
And they're pretty handy if you haven't hacked around with them yet.
Yeah, I haven't been using a ton of hooks. I should probably get with the program here. All right. Next up, we have post-processing, where Dan, you're going to talk to us about an AI vibe coding horror story.
Am I going to talk to you about that?
I don't know. Are you?
Yeah. So this was an interesting thing where someone was writing about their experience going to doctor's appointment, and they essentially vibe coded an entire sort of like appointment application, all kinds of other things into one app. And this person who's an engineer took a look at it and was like, it inlined the entire app into a single HTML page. So there was like zero security whatsoever because it was like entirely client side. And it was using cloud managed database thing and didn't have any kind of access control on it. Because all the credentials and everything are right in the front end. Yeah. So it was pretty wild. And I'm not sure things could get much more wild than that, honestly. Because I don't know about y'all, but I've had to take HIPAA training before, and it's no joke. So I can't imagine going from taking HIPAA training to going yeah, I'm going to YOLO out a patient, and everything will be fine. So yeah, pretty wild.
This is the bullshit future that's already here. The aforementioned bullshit future.
You would think that even if you didn't have the coding chops, right, you would still working in a medical environment have to know about HIPAA or whatever. That maybe this was a German thing, so maybe they don't have quite the same laws around it. But knowing EU, you'd think they would have more stringent laws around it, if anything. But
yeah, they do.
I just thought it was a funny one.
So what do you guys think could be done or should be done to prevent this from happening? I guess it's the open question.
Yeah, I don't. I think on the one hand, you would hope somehow that the model is smart enough to not do that, even when not being given prompts around make this secure, Yeah. But on the other hand, the thing that I've been noticing remember a couple 3-4 weeks ago we talked about the sort of spread happening where the lines between design, product, and engineering are blurring, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are, but they aren't. And I think this is a good example of how they aren't, right? because certainly the edges are getting fuzzier, but like I've been, again, another little work story. I've been helping out some folks at work that are not engineers try to get set up on Claude and poke around in code bases and stuff. The amount of like overwhelm that I encountered from those types of folks around stuff that I think is totally normal, like getting your M set up and everything, was pretty funny to me. And that was to me a very dramatic illustration of that there is still a gulf between technical and non-technical users, separate even from this one, right? Because like these are people that work in the industry, know what I'm talking about when I talk about a really complicated feature, right? But still don't have that sort of like, I don't know, fundamental engineering rigor that goes into some of that stuff, and like don't necessarily understand the reasoning behind like why things are done that way, right? So given that, I'm like, will this gap ever really be bridged, right? I mean, I think there's some expectation that the model could tackle some of it, but in other ways certainly not, you know? Like you just have to know from experience that like you shouldn't hard code your database credentials into a front-end application.
Yeah, it might eventually get bridged, but no time soon, right? We can't just learn at the speed of AI and all the things you do. And like someone who's outside their circle of competence, like you can't go, yeah, so this got vibe coded, so now I understand how to create applications and deploy them and everything. So it's fun to play around with, but then this is what you get if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and also to some degree, I think it's about like thinking logically too, right? Like even if you didn't know this stuff, like if you had sort of an engineer's brain, you might have gone, "Hi, I need to comply with what is the German? Looks like NDSG law."
Yeah.
And I want to build a patient portal. Like, what are some ways that I could consider doing that? You know, that would be secure. And then you might get actually probably reasonable output out of the LLM about it. But you'd have to know to ask that question in the first place, you know?
Yes, but even then you wouldn't. There's no way. What I'm trying to figure out is there a world where that person would know for certain that what they built, what they vibe coded, complies with the NDSG law, right? Because if they don't, then it's just a spectrum of like, are you sticking everything in a single HTML page and lining everything to like, maybe it looks much more complicated because you spun up microservices and stuff, but at the end of the day, you still don't know what you're doing or what you're talking about. You just know that it works. And so how do you close that gap? Is like, if you take away the coding agent, can they do anything with it if it breaks? Or can they even maintain it?
Right. So I guess developer jobs still safe as of now.
Yeah, until AGI comes, what's the timeline? 10 months from now or something?
2027.
Or we get so used to using agents that we don't know how it works anymore either, because I feel like that's happening to me every day.
Too dystopian, Dan. Our next article, which is also brought to you by Dan.
Yeah. So where do I start with this? The future of everything is lies, I guess. Where do we go from here? Is the title of this extremely long post. I have to admit something to our dear readers, which is that I only read the last of the 10 chapters of this 10 chapter post. So if you don't know Afer, this is the gentleman that runs Jepson.io that does a lot of like benchmarking around distributed system stuff. So like he's always running like compliance tests on DBs, and I feel like he was also got into like a rather public spat with the Redis guy around like how good Redis was and all this kind of stuff. But I was lucky enough to go to a talk that he gave a while back, and I learned like so much stuff about distributed systems just from like that 2-day talk. So whenever he says things, I tend to at least pay attention, if not, you know, read it in detail, which I absolutely did not do this time, but it was by accident, I promise you. And so he hasn't really like talked too much about LMs at all. And so it was kind of interesting to see that he actually wrote a pretty lengthy post about it. But since I only read the last page, I can't tell you too much about the whole thing. Recommend generally reading it, but there was some interesting takeaways on the last page for sure, which the one I found personally funny was that there was like kind of a big, like a lot of analysis is put into looking at all these other things. And then at the very end hints that like it's great for using to tackle your personal smart light project. For some reason that really got me. Like after all this like really deep thinking is just like, and here you go. I'm using it to automate. Or not to automate, to, fix some firmware issues in my smart lights or something. So, which I can relate to.
Yeah, and that is a great use case for it.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, the one piece that I thought was also pretty interesting. I'm like, I swear I didn't read it, but I do remember reading the first thing of it too, which is he's like makes an analogy to the car, right? Which is what's on screen right now if you're watching the video of this, and that really hit me because it's like I've often thought about this, like how much, at least in American society, our entire society is shaped by the car and how it didn't used to be. Like all the changes that's wrought in our culture, like his line is like, I want you to think about AI in this sense is like pretty interesting, right? Because it's like that is likely going to cause the same kind of culture, or already is causing the same kind of cultural shift, just at a pace that is like maybe even feels more accelerated than cars, Yeah. So, yeah. But you had some stories too, which were hopefully better than mine, embarrassing.
So one, I definitely agree with you that it's the second order and maybe third order effects of automobile adoption were probably not clear and not available to everyone before everyone just jumped on the car bandwagon. Ooh, is that a thing? Car bandwagon. And I want to also point out that
wagon. Yeah.
Car instead of wagon, yes. And he has a list of things to do. If you agree with his main central thesis, which is like LLMs are not reliable and their second and third order effects are probably negative for society at large. And I want you guys to listen to this and then think about when you will start disagreeing, or maybe not. But first thing to do is to think your own thoughts and write in your own words. Second, flag people who send you slop. Third, flag ML hazards at work with friends. Fourth, stop paying for ChatGPT at home and convince your company not to sign a deal for Gemini. Fifth, form or join a labor union and push back against management demand that you adopt Copilot, after all. Sixth, call your member of Congress and demand regulation. Seventh, advocate against tax breaks for ML data centers. And eighth, if you work at Anthropic, you should seriously think about your role in making the future. To be frank, I think you should quit your job. Gentlemen, where did you jump off this car wagon?
Gemini, I like that one. I don't like people sending slop, but if they used it to create something that, we've talked about that whole like system 1, 2, 3 thinking. If they used it to make something even better, express themselves better, like I'm all for it.
Yeah. Dan, what about you?
Well, I had, it's funny. Last week we were talking about anxiety or whatever. We were trying to colonize. Or I had a coworker that was in a situation where they had a tight deadline. Claude wasn't getting it done, and they weren't sure what to do. I just hit it today.
Yeah. Oof.
And like the exact even tighter deadline, like I had like hours to get something done, and ran into that and didn't know the root cause and couldn't nail it down. Hopefully the person that had done the original code was available and was able to figure it out in like probably 5 minutes, which didn't help my thinking about this. And like to me, that was kind of a wake up call. It's like I've really, really started depending too much on this thing and have started advocating my own thinking about it, and that's not good. And I need to stop doing that. So I don't think I'm gonna quit entirely using it, but I think I need to spend definitely making sure that my time is spent staying sharp too, because I don't think that's happening right now. And the weird thing about that is that my instinct is to not do that. Right. My instinct is to like double down on this and be like, no, I just wasn't using the tooling right, which is fascinating to me because it's like, why is that my instinct,
If I can add to it's not just your instinct, but also if you look at the environment that everybody's operating in, it's this like Red Queen effect where you have to run to stay in the same place because sure, you would want to slow down and make sure you do these things, but your environment would force you to be like, Dan, where's that thing? Other people can do this in 2 or 3 hours. Why is it taking you 6 or 7 hours? You can say, because I understand it better. They might go, yeah, but I still want it in 2 or 3 hours because that's just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, but what
almost these
happens when you sit a
evolutionary pressures you're
situation
dealing with.
where it's not gonna happen in 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think any level of prompting or AI skill would have gotten me there in this situation. It took genuinely understanding a missing piece of the system that I just didn't know about to figure it out. So, like, maybe I would have gotten lucky and Claude would have picked that piece up, you know? But, like, it's not like I was like, oh, and because I find like when I do best with these systems, it's always like, okay, I know exactly what I'm getting into. And I sort of lead Claude to it like a junior engineer almost, where I'm like, okay, now look at all these files. And then here's this. Oh, and by the way, now we're going to do this thing with all these things that you just looked at. I find that works like really well in terms of like getting, well-structured, decent output that works most of the time. But in this case, it was like blind leading the blind, you know? Like, whoa.
That's how you inline a whole app in your on the client side. How else?
Well, apparently I'm only one inline away from working in German healthcare. So
start learning your NDSG rules.
Yeah. No, and I'm not saying, again, I don't think I'm going to go to the extreme of this and say I'm not going to use it. But I think that like I do see a world where like the cognitive debt stuff that we've talked about is really critical, and where like if I start to feel like I don't understand how the underlying technology works anymore, then I'm going to be really worried, you know? So it's like I need to at least do some things to stay sharp.
Yeah, because you lose the details. And
as a rule, I still read every single line of MR PRs that LLM generates. Unless it's
like I tend to do my own code review before I foist it on some unsuspecting human, but
the friction is not there.
Yeah, and also like, you know, this is a situation where like it's a big code base. A lot of people are prompt engineering on it, and I think that like that sort of cognitive debt thing can spring up on you a lot faster than you might appreciate. So
like before, when everybody hand wrote code and you had to review a handful of PRs a day, it was such a big pain to keep the whole system in your head at any given time. And now imagine like that, but at 1000x speed. You're like, man, I can't keep up with this. It's like watching a video so fast that you can't make out the words or anything like that.
Yeah, but the person that did solve the situation had actually handwritten some of the tooling pre-LLM stuff around it, and that was why they were able to solve it. So,
well, it would be interesting if you find yourself in a similar situation a year from now when both you and they
no one has the knowledge.
Report back on April 21, 2027. If AGI is not here, we want to hear how that is going.
Yeah, maybe the crisis isn't like junior developers not coming up. Maybe the crisis is senior developers or just all developers losing the capacity to keep up with code. You guys, speaking of not reading your own PRs, for this week's Vibe and Tell, this is I did not read any of the lines. Well, that's not true. I did not read like 95% of the lines. In this AI arena that I was working on over the weekend. You know, we were talking about automobile and its second and third order effects on society. And I was staying up late, kind of chatting with Claude, not in like an AI psychosis kind of a way, but I was wondering it all started when I was trying to create a sci-fi world with the help of Claude. When I asked Claude to generate for me a world where humans discovered an alloy that has extremely high tensile strength, but extremely weak shear strength, and what the ramification of that would be, right? It's like you have really good suspension bridges and you'll have people living in the sky, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then I started asking for, third order, fourth order effects. And I thought like, hey, we could do this with AI too, right? Like, why don't we just ask AI what they think the second, third, fourth, and up order effects of AI should be? And then why don't we have them grade each other depending on their results and guess which model is which. So this is basically what this app is. I send 11 prompts. Most of them are state of the art, other than I think Gemini 2.5. I serve that as a kind of lower tier benchmark baseline. And I sent them 3 prompts. Given everything you know about AI, what are the changes that should occur in our world that hasn't happened yet? Think it through step by step and industry by industry. And then I ask for second and third order effects, and then fourth order and up. And this is where the folks who are saying Opus 4.7 is actually really awesome. I tend to agree with them. Opus 4.7 consistently scored the highest. It was in the top 3 of every single other word.
What does the score mean?
We're right, okay. Steps here. Yes, we're missing some steps. And then I took the results, the output of my conversation with all 11 models. Mm-hmm. And then since these are all fairly frontier models, they all have like 1 million context tokens. And I asked them to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10 for reasoning ability, originality of ideas, and correctness. And then write a review for each model to describe its personality. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and of course, to predict which model is which. The model part, less useful, because the more recent models would be exposed to other models. Like Gemini 2.5 is not going to know anything about Opus 4.7, right? Mm-hmm. The reverse is not true. But based on the average scores that were generated by all models, you then average them to get a relative strength of the models according to other models. Opus 4.7's response is the highest. And I have Opus 4.7 is the one whose response I read it's the one that I read the entire response of. And it was indeed very impressive. You can find the output further down this page. Second place is Opus 4.6, which is not super surprising, followed by GPT-5.4, followed by Kimi K2.5, which I thought was a huge shocker. Kimi did better than DeepSeek, Minimax, Q3 Maxing, Qwen 3 Max Thinking, GLM 5.1. Some of the GLM 5.1 is more recent than Kimi 2.5. Grok, 9th place, surprising, or maybe not so surprising. But really the surprising part is Gemini 2.5 Flash did better than Gemini 3.1 Pro Preview. And that 3.1 is squarely last place, 7th place. What else? Let's take a look at how the models see themselves and how other models see them. I think Grok here is probably the most interesting one. Almost every single model was able to correctly identify Grok because it kept on referring to the work at XAI. Every other model is like, talks about XAI, must be Grok. Seems to be, it considers
identify itself.
Grok definitely identified. Grok also, I forgot which one. I think Grok thought either DeepSeek or Kimi was also Grok. So I thought that was pretty funny as well.
I mean, maybe it is. Who knows? It's distilled from it.
Yeah. Grok considers itself to be a bold truth seeker, existential bent, XAI aligned, frame agents as tools for universal understanding. Whereas all the other AIs consider it to be, frankly, full of itself and is quite undertuned. Here you have, there's also a section titled the Delusion Index, where you take the model's score for itself and subtract it from what everyone else thought about itself. So the weaker models tend to think more highly of its own performance, whereas the stronger models tend to either correctly identify its own strength or be on the humble side. GPT-5.4, negative 1.6, yeah, very humble model. And lastly, Opus 4.7 also did the best job when it comes to identifying the other models. Here, for this purpose, it works if the family is correct. So if it thinks it's an Anthropic model, then it counts, essentially. It doesn't have to identify exactly 4.6 or 4.5. But models are not great at it, and the Chinese open weight models are pretty much invisible. Nobody can identify them. Not even themselves, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, almost everybody got Grok right, as you can see. Yeah, that was a project. You can read the outputs. I think they're actually pretty fascinating. A lot of them are the stronger models has fairly interesting insights on how AI would impact our society. So get on the AI wagon. All right, and you can check this out. And you can check out the arena yourself at shimin.io/AI on AI arena. Yeah, this is where the 20x tokens are going to, gents. Although I did use OpenRouter for the actual API calls.
Runs,
Because can't use Cloud Code for all of it.
Huh. Well, keeping the dream alive with personal funding. I love it.
It wasn't expensive. It was like $4 to run all this.
I know, but still, not nothing. And pretty cool project idea, I gotta say.
Thank you.
Anything else from Rahul?
Go ahead.
Otherwise, just say I was gonna do my world famous transition from, speaking of going back and forth in perspectives, that brings us
there we go.
2 minutes to midnight, where we talk about how we like to go back and forth on the AI bubble every single week. Is it happening? It's definitely happening. No, it's probably not happening. In any case, we look at it through the lens of the atomic clock from the 1980s, which is when the Bureau of Atomic Scientists got together and used the number of minutes away from midnight as the amount of time until we were going to have a nuclear exchange between the great powers. So we use that same framework to talk about how close are we to an AI bubble bursting. And boy, do we have some articles this week.
Yeah, big ones this week.
Yeah, starting with one for me, which is from one of my old standbys, Ars Technica, and it is entitled "Satellite and Drone Images Reveal Big Delays in U.S. Data Center Construction." So, as we talked about many times on this segment, we know that we've been dumping billions and billions and billions of dollars into data centers, power grids, all this other stuff to try to support building out, things like, what is that called? Project Stargate or whatever. Yeah. But when you actually go look at satellite imagery of a lot of these sites, they're a lot further along than what press releases and other things are sort of leading you to believe. So I guess it's not surprising, considering real world construction is, not the easiest thing in the world. But
so electricity prices are going to go even higher, is what I'm hearing.
Sure seeming that way.
Great.
Didn't Microsoft sign that pledge of something that we're not
they're going to eat the electric prices? I think Anthropic did
ratepayer protection pledge.
Yeah.
Oh, good on Microsoft.
But it's a pledge. There's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, guys will try.
Yeah, just like the climate pledge arena. Yes, of course.
And then you get all these natural gas turbines that are powering the data centers.
After the pledge, there's an asterisk and it says "for entertainment purposes only."
Oh man.
Yeah. So yeah, I bring this up in the 2 minutes context because I think it's one thing to look, a lot of times we look at what is the, who is funding what, circular deals, blah, 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 in the context of this segment. But we don't talk very much about what is the actual physical output of where all this money is going. So I thought it was kind of a neat lens to look and see, how far along these things actually are.
Yeah. You would think a classic second order effect of building this many data centers is the salaries of plumbers and electricians and specialized construction workers will go through the roof right now. And I'm not hearing a ton of it in the mainstream news. Not sure why. Maybe it's because they are having actually trouble finding folks or paying the market wages on these things.
It could be, but the type of person that does this scale is a little different than I think your average Joe household plumber.
Yeah,
so maybe that's
they probably already make $1,000 a year, but they should be making $2 million a year.
Yeah.
And Rahul, you have an article that is from Epoch AI that is also in this genre.
Pretty similar to what Dan had shared. They have photos of all the different sites. They're specifically focused on OpenAI Stargate. It's by Elliot Stewart and Ben Cottier at Epoch AI. They have photos of all the different, I think it's 9 sites or something, across the different parts of the country and how far along they are. The planned completion date goes even into late 2028. And one thing they called out was the collective capacity that they're bringing online is 9 gigawatts, I think, which is about the peak usage of New York City. So it was good to have that in perspective. And also these are not you don't want your power coming from natural gas turbines and stuff, but you're getting a microgrid that is independent of the other grid and could supply some things in case of a disaster, whether you want it or not. So you're getting some, it has been a goal for a while for people who want smaller grids and be able to do all this to be we don't want to be connected to a larger grid. And if you have smaller grids, you're more resilient to bad things happening. And so we're getting some of that. Whether did we want it in this shape, I don't know. But we're getting it because of the different constraints. I think OpenAI pulled out of that Norway expansion, or what was it, where Microsoft then went in. So that was part of it, and other things in UK. This is from a different article. Sorry, I don't have it handy. But things are not going as well on the across the Atlantic, is what I'm trying to say. And some of these things that are planned until 2028, they're still working against, local government opposition, people pushing back on things. There's, who knows, by the time late 2028 comes around with OpenAI's recent record, where we end up with this. So take it with a grain of salt.
All right. And I've got a Paul Graham tweet for this week's 2 Minutes to Midnight, and it is a graph showing the various investment cycles, large investment cycles in United States history. The tweet itself says, there's never been an investment like the investment in railroads. And the graph has a log scale. The U.S. railroad investment peaked at around 10% of U.S. GDP from the start of the railroads project. Now, of course, railroads famously went bust, right, and consolidated. So if we are in a bubble, and we think we are, this is a good comparison. And right now, data center spend is at around 1%, a little less than 1% of GDP.
Which, to put it in perspective, is the Apollo program.
Which in the grand scheme of things wasn't that big of a project, I gotta say. Some of the other ones that are the only other investment cycle bigger than data center capex right now is the Marshall Plan. But it is already bigger in terms of GDP than the Interstate Highway Program, the F-35. I have to say, when you compare it to the F-35 program, I'm just here going like, well, that's not that much. Log scale, of course. I think when you actually look at the data center program in terms of U.S. railroads, there's another 40 years to go, and another 9% of GDP to engulf. Is kind of my takeaway.
What happened? I don't know much of Dan, maybe this is an area of expertise, a hidden area of expertise you have, we don't know about. So these railroad companies that went bust, what happened to them? Did the government take over? Did other railroad companies take over?
I think that's more of a Shimin area of experience than me.
Oh, really?
Considering he's a detective from the railroad era at heart.
I'm, of course, not an expert either, but I believe a lot of them went bankrupt and were purchased on the pennies by others, and they consolidated and cut a lot of
just
routes.
Abandoned.
Yeah, some of them probably got abandoned as well.
So here we go. Thank you, Wikipedia, before it gets taken over by LLMs. 1890s, Panic of 1893. Philadelphia and Reading Railroad went bust. 150 railroads followed. Okay. But it's just like a list. That didn't help me. Mm-hmm. I need history, Wikipedia.
You need Grokpedia. That's what
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the record, I think people talk a lot about how the U.S. stock market has always returned 8% since the Great Depression. Y'all have never looked at the charts in the 1890s during the railroad bust. Just expand that time horizon back a little bit, and it tells a fairly different story. Of course, no, this is financial advice. Rahul is looking it up right now, but it's good to have some perspective.
Because I furiously read Wikipedia to try to get you a reasonable summary.
There were lots of bubbles between the Civil War and the Great Depression. Every decade was another huge bubble.
Looks like Reading went to government control.
Oh, some of them did.
Yeah. At least during World War I. So I don't know that, that's not indicative of the rest of the bubble necessarily, but that's what happened to Reading.
Too big to fail. That's what I'm hearing. As always, not financial advice. We're not financial advisors.
Or direct LLMs who write code.
Yeah, there's I was looking up this different thing that Warren Buffett had written during the global financial crisis in 2008, and he said Over the long term, the stock market news will be good. In the 20th century, the United States endured 2 world wars and other traumatic and expensive military conflicts, the Depression, a dozen or so recessions, and financial panics, oil shocks, flu epidemic, and the resignation of a disgraced president. Yet the Dow rose from 66 to 11,497. So it puts those things in perspectives.
Yeah, my counterpoint is if you happen to live for that long and your window is 30, 35 years working window, that got a little dark. No, that's too dark. Let's bring it up to the happy side and let's talk about 2 minutes. All that said, how do we feel about the clock this week? We're at 2 minutes and 45 seconds last week.
I'm honestly, this is going to be uncharacteristic, but I kind of want to bring it back a little bit more. And I think it's the Paul
Seems
Graham
fine.
tweet that does it for me.
Don't build those data centers. So I'm going to throw back another, I'm thinking 45 seconds to 3 minutes and 30 seconds, if you're good about that.
But I was
Yeah.
thinking more just like 3, but sure, why not?
But what would be hilarious is you at its most optimistic is when you all of a sudden see a crash and then we'll be like, we knew what we were talking about this whole time.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for Rahul, apparently. Tuesday, April 20. I mean, look, there's plenty of cracks, right, that keep happening, but
Well,
I
we're
just
about
think that
to with between the second half of the year is going to be pretty entertaining between all the IPOs people have geared up to the
Yep.
midterms, and they're going to try and do the IPOs before the midterms, assuming Democrats come in power and then say, what is this bullshit and all that stuff. We'll find out pretty soon how close we are to it.
Right. So what you're saying is the writers have made sure that AI companies have plot armor for the first half of this year, just for everything to go down together in the second half, I trust.
And boy, the finale of this season of LLMs versus America is going to be one heck of a show.
Well, we'll be here to recap every single episode. But with that said, that's the show, folks. Thank you again for joining us for our conversation this week. If you like the show, if you learned something new, please share the show with a friend. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people to discover the show, and we really appreciate it. Thank you again for listening. We'll catch you next week. Bye.